So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to this fourth webinar that we're organizing under the Biological Weapons Convention. My name is Daniel Feeks. I'm the head of the Implementation Support Unit here in Geneva of the BWC. Today's webinar is going to be discussing the topic of institutional strengthening of the convention. This is the topic that's being dealt with by Meeting of Experts number 5 by MX5. We've already got over 100 people participating from all around the world, so welcome to you all, wherever you are. It's great that you're all taking the time to participate in these webinars, so thanks very much for spending the time with us today. We've got quite a packed schedule today, so I won't spend too long speaking to you myself. What I did want to do before I hand over to the moderator for this afternoon's webinar is just quickly run through the rules. You should be familiar to you by now anyway, but if we can just remind you again to please have your cameras switched off, your microphones muted throughout the webinar. We can't give the floor to individual participants to ask questions directly due to time constraints, but if you do have any questions to any of the speakers, you can send them in writing through the chat function to host and presenter. All the questions will be submitted privately, and please indicate to whom you would like to address your question. The webinar is going to be recorded for people who are unable to attend. We'll share the link on our website later on so that those unable to can watch again later, and we'll also, with the consent of the presenters, make their presentation slides available via the website as well. So this is the fourth, as I mentioned, in a series of 5 informal webinars, so we have one more to come. The remaining webinar will cover MX1, that is the topic of assistance and cooperation, and it will take place, as you can see here, on the 24th of November at the same time as today. That's 1 p.m. Central European time. Okay, I will, as I said, I will stop there. Thank you again for your participation. It's good to have so many people online again today. I will now hand over to the moderator for this session, who is the chair of MX5. That's Ms. Grisel del Carmen Rodriguez Ramirez from Panama. Grisel, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the group of the Non-Aligned Movement and other states to the BWC for my nomination, and all of you for your support for my work as chair of the Meeting of Experts on Institutional Strengthening of the Convention. I'm privileged to enjoy working with my highly experienced colleagues as the other MX chairs, and we all work under the able guidance of our MSP chair, Ambassador Mailu of Kenya. I would also like to express my appreciation to the ISU for co-organizing this webinar. It is a very timely initiative that enables informal discussions on the topics to be considered by MX5, and thus to prepare and to contribute to a successful outcome of the 9th Review Conference. Let me also thank all the speakers that contribute to this important event. Like other meetings of experts, MX5 also touches upon critical issues. The unprecedented global impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic illustrate the potential for disease outbreaks to cause suffering, loss of life, and economic disruption on a vast scale, and without respect for national borders. While the COVID-19 pandemic is a public health crisis, a scenario involving the deliberate use of disease as a weapon may even pose a far greater challenges to the international community. In this light, there has never been a greater awareness of the need to strengthen the BWC as an institution, because it is the only international forum in which these threats posed by biological weapons can be addressed in a holistic manner. Therefore, the current pandemic has not only reinforced the value of the BWC in general, but it has highlighted in particular the value of our discussions within the MX5, which offers a privileged forum to address the institutional strengthening of BWC. I hope that our discussions can lead to broad support by state parties for a set of concrete proposals to be considered at the 9th Review Conference. This conference is crucial, and we all have to arrive well prepared for it. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the MX5 aims to consider the full range of approaches and options to further strengthen the Convention and its functioning through possible additional legal measures and other measures in the framework of the Convention. This mandate has become increasingly important in recent years, as was widely acknowledged at previous BWC meetings, in light of several growing challenges facing the Convention. For example, rapidly evolving developments in science and technology raise concerns about the potential misuse of these advances. Challenges also relate to the highly dynamic environment in which the BWC operates, as it involves a range of stakeholders, including states, industry, academia, and civil society. Similarly, there is a growing concern that biological weapons may be used for terrorist purposes. State parties also pointed to these increased threats. These and other challenges underline the urgency to strengthening the Convention. In light of these challenges, it is encouraging that MX5 in 2018 and in 2019 saw very active and constructive discussions, including the enriching and in-depth exchange of experts on various proposals to be considered. While there is a difference in views on approaches to strengthening the Convention, state parties overall underline the importance of the BWC and stress the need to further strengthen it institutionally. Today's webinar will allow us to hear about some of these proposals, and it will facilitate a more general exchange of views on this important topic. I remain hopeful that questions relating to those proposals can be further addressed at the upcoming meetings, and we can prepare the ground for a successful outcome of the 9th Review Conference and make progress towards the institutional strengthening of the Convention. Without further ado, I would like to give now the floor to our speakers. We will begin with remarks delivered by Ambassador Janar Aizanova, Permanent Representative of Kazakhstan to the UN and other international organizations in Geneva. Ambassador Aizanova will introduce a very recent proposal announced by the Kazakh President, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, in his statement at the UN General Assembly on 23 September 2020. Kazakhstan proposes to establish a special multilateral body, the International Agency for Biological Safety, that would be based on the BWC and accountable to the UN Security Council. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
I'm sorry, Ambassador, we can't hear you. Your microphone. I think phone, that's better. Oh, no, it's muted again.
Do you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to our chair and the Implementation Support Unit of the BWC for organizing today's webinar and the invitation to share with participants some preliminary thoughts related to the recent initiative of the President of Kazakhstan, Mr. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. President Tokayev, at the 75th session of the UN General Assembly, proposed to establish a special multilateral body, the International Agency for Biological Safety, based on the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention and accountable to the UN Security Council. In the light of recent COVID-19 pandemic, the issue of reducing biological threats is becoming even more relevant. We all know that the institutionalization of the convention remains a challenge, the solution of which would help significantly strengthen the BWC regime. The current pandemic demonstrated how underestimated the danger of massive infection was. In this regard, there is an urgent need to strengthen coordination and control over measures taken at the national, regional, and international levels to counter biological threats. In addition, the risks of dangerous pathogens falling into the wrong hands or the creation of biological weapons are still underestimated. It is important to establish a dialogue between all stakeholders in order to achieve mutual understanding, which will further contribute to the development of an atmosphere of trust and confidence. Even so, the idea of the agency was proposed by Kazakhstan Its successful realization depends on each BWC state party, who I hope will make an important constructive contribution to the process. Ladies and gentlemen, the context in which the proposal of Kazakhstan was made is rapidly changing. Some important developments are taking place which we need to take into account. In particular, I refer to the May 2020 decision by the World Health Organization to establish a process of impartial, independent, and comprehensive evaluation in order to review experience gained and lessons learned from the WHO coordinated international health response to COVID-19. As a result of WHO decision, an independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response was created with a mandate to make recommendations to improve global pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response capacity. France, Germany, the United States, and Brazil submitted their views, what priorities the panel should focus on, and what outcome they would expect. Deliberations by the panel will be made available next May. But what we can already anticipate is that expectations among member states of a stronger WHO and increased multilateral and national capabilities to detect and respond to health emergencies are high. In our view, the proposed agency should be part of this collective and holistic process. In this regard, President Tokayev, in the same statement at the UN General Assembly session, emphasized that it may be necessary to revise the international health regulations to increase the World Health Organization's capacity and to develop national capabilities in preventing and responding to diseases, and suggested that the idea of a network of regional centers for disease control and biosafety under the UN auspices be closely examined. Kazakhstan stands ready to host such a regional center. Therefore, it would be reasonable to explore possible linkages between the World Health Organization and the future agency in order to complement each other, provide exchange of information, and avoid duplication of work. Capacity building in the area of biosafety and biosecurity might be an important element of future work within the agency, as the level of national expertise differs from country to country. We might start thinking about institutionalization of measures to increase transparency and build confidence. In our view, experience accumulated so far by state parties in the area of confidence-building measures is rich and can serve as a foundation for broader application. Finally, I would like to touch upon the most challenging question, the issue of verification. We know that many states speak in favor of verification, but there is no consensus. Rapid technological advances make the task of verification even more difficult today. We still believe that we can make an attempt and find a common ground for what could be a verification mechanism in the future. At this point, I would like to stop here and listen to other participants. This is not an official presentation of Kazakhstan's initiative, but rather an invitation for an open dialogue. We are open-minded, ready to listen to everyone, and will keep working along the proposal made by President Tokayev. Hopefully, over the period of 1 year, in November 2021, we'll have the 9th review conference mandated to take decisions on issues of strategic nature for the convention. We are going to use time between now and then to formulate a collective vision of the future agency and present it to the review conference. I know that you might have questions related to legal status, financing, and so on, but at the current stage, in our view, we need to determine what objectives and tasks the future agency should be assigned. After we define its mandate, we can look into legal and financial matters. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for providing further insight on this novel and very interesting proposal that is enriching our discussions. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Dr. Cleopa Kilonzo Mailu of Kenya, Chairperson of the Meeting of States Parties. Ambassador Mailu will share further information about his efforts to promote the universalization of the Convention. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, moderator. Dear participants, I'm pleased to speak to you today at this webinar on institutional strengthening of the Convention. Let me begin by noting that universalization has been among the various issues addressed at MX5 in 2018 and 2019. In the discussions, states parties stressed the importance of further efforts in support of enhancing the effectiveness of the Convention. As you are aware, the Convention now has 183 state parties and has grown steadily in recent years. My mandate as MSP Chair requires me to promote the universalization of the Biological Weapons Convention during my time in office. While joining the international treaty is a sovereign national decision, the current pandemic has clearly demonstrated the need for international cooperation and solidarity in the face of disease outbreaks. The situation should indeed awaken countries to the realities we are and may be able to face in the future. Certainly, this would certainly be the case in the event of the deliberate use of disease as a weapon. I would like to share with you some of the activities that I have undertaken so far. At the same time, I would also like to use this opportunity today in encouraging all of you to join me in this important endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, in September 2020, I wrote to the 4 signatory states, as well as the 10 states not party to the BWC, to understand their situation and encourage them to consider joining. Since then, the ISU has been engaging with a number of those states and provided further information on the ratification or accession process. It is worth mentioning that the Office of the Attorney General in Tuvalu contacted the ISU to request assistance in drafting a policy paper on the benefits of and obligations and the BWC in view of a potential accession to be considered by its government. Furthermore, Ms. Izumi Nakamisu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, has approached Namibia earlier this year to encourage them to join the convention. As member states, we appreciate our efforts to reach out to member states who have not joined to enhance the universalization of the current of the convention. I have also been engaged in universalization efforts carried out under European Union Council Decision 2019-97 in support of the Biological Weapons Convention. A regional workshop for the 8 non-member states from Africa was initially envisioned to take place in April 2020 in Nairobi. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the workshop had to be postponed, given that travel restrictions and social distancing measures can be expected to persist for a while. The workshop is planned to be held now in virtual format in the coming months. Its primary objective will be to bring together the African states not party to the convention to discuss and better understand the benefits of joining the Biological Weapons Convention, to increase their awareness of the convention and to stimulate the active involvement in its activities. As a result, it is expected that African states not party will gain an enhanced understanding of the BWC and will take steps towards joining the convention, advancing its implementation and engaging in relevant activities and meetings. It is also my intention to organize in due course, with the support of the ISU, a universalization webinar for all states not yet party to the BWC. The event will be a good opportunity to raise awareness on the convention, to further strengthen contact with those governments' representatives to seek further information on their ratification or accession process, as well as understanding better the challenges they face with the process. Furthermore, I also plan to hold a series of virtual bilateral meetings with my counterparts from states not party in the following weeks and months to discuss universalization and seek further information on their progress. Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks the 45th anniversary of the entry into force of the Biological Weapons Convention. During the intervening years, the Convention has made an important contribution towards collective efforts to eliminate such threats. Today, the norm against biological weapons remains strong, and the very idea of using disease as a weapon is viewed with repugnance. I note that more than 20 states have joined the BWC in the past 10 years, thereby demonstrating its continued relevance. However, we cannot rest on these accomplishments and need to continue striving for universal adherence to the Convention. We all unequivocally share a common interest to strengthen BWC. I am convinced that we can achieve substantive progress when doing this together. Seeing such a diverse audience here at this webinar, experts from the state parties, representatives of various international organizations, as well as members of civil society and academia, is vital for furthering the cause of the convention, and it underscores the importance countries, organizations, and individuals hold the convention. I would be happy to discuss any initiatives and to support your efforts in this regard. I therefore wish to encourage you to continue with the interest of ensuring that in the near future, we gain 100% universalization of the Biological Weapon Convention, whose importance has been underscored by the current pandemic of COVID-19, leave alone a situation where there is misuse of the biological products. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador, for all your efforts to promoting the universalization of the convention despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to give now the floor to Dr. James Reville, a researcher at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. Dr. Reville has published extensively on the convention and closely followed BWC proceedings since many years. I am therefore grateful that he will share with us today his reflections on the institutional strengthening of the BWC in a changing context. Dr. Reville, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, afternoon, or evening to all. Thank you for the chance to be able to speak at this event. To clarify, the views in this presentation are not those of UNIDIR or the UN. Rather, this is a response to the request of the Chair to provide inputs to MX5. And in doing so, I wanted to first start by looking at the changing life science landscape for some thoughts on so what questions. So if I may have the next slide, please, Donald. Okay, so since 1972, the science and technology of relevance to this convention has changed considerably and is further accelerating as biology converges with other technologies, leading to greater digitization and perhaps the democratization of the life sciences in the future. As the science and technology has changed, so too has the geography and the economy of life science research, with ever more institutions and actors engaged in the study of biology in a growing range of countries around the world. To illustrate this, I've done a rather basic and a rather crude scan using a Web of Science database to look at publication records for biotechnology. As you can see on the screen, in 1990, there were some 492 scholarly publications, produced by 664 authors in 297 institutions across 31 different countries. By 2018, these numbers have risen by orders of magnitude to about 3,500 papers produced by more than 14,000 scholars working at nearly 4,000 institutes across 113 different countries. If I could have the next slide, please. We also have a considerable increase in biotechnology-related patent activity in many regions of the world. The graph here illustrates the number of biotechnology patents granted by Regional Patent Office between 1990 and 2018, and this is based on WIPO data. The growth of the biotech sector and indeed the bioeconomy looks set to continue in the coming decades. Indeed, McKinsey have estimated the impact of biotechnology could reach an estimated $4 trillion per year over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. Now, there will be academics and scholars who can rightly quibble these estimates and provide a more refined assessment of the situation, but I don't think anybody would quibble that things have changed considerably. Moreover, I think most people would agree that these trends are a positive development, with potential benefits to societies, to the environment, and to economies. Nonetheless, this does take place against the backdrop of an evolving security context that is characterized by tension and geostrategic competition, and in which the potential functions and utilities of biological weapons may have expanded and evolved. And the nature and the footprint of contemporary offensive programs could well be very different to those of the past. So if we could have the next slide, please. And first click. Thank you. Okay, so just in terms of sort of steps that could be taken, it seems fairly clear that efforts to institutionally strengthen this convention need to take into account this changing context. And part of this will involve engaging stakeholders that are actively shaping this research landscape. Particularly important here is will be engagement with industry and private sector bodies. It is notable that elsewhere the chemical industry has been recognized as a key stakeholder in the implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And last week, there was further formalized cooperation between the OPCW and the chemical industry associations in areas including verification, safety, and security. Yet if we look in the BWC, we see that engagement is rather limited. So one practical, fairly simple step could be to make space, but also create incentives for industry engagement, particularly in the run-up to the review conference. And this could be achieved through, for example, organizing industry panels, building on some of the work in 2011, and also inviting industry representatives to workshops and events to get a better sense of their concerns, their interest in what could be done. Another idea that might be useful to consider is taking stock of what is quite a broad range of national initiatives that could potentially contribute to institutional strengthening of the Biological Weapons Convention. There's actually been quite a lot that has been done over the last 2 decades. To provide some illustrative examples, we see Australian stakeholder outreach through capital city roadshows, Cuban codes of professional ethics for scientists, the establishment of a Danish Centre for Biosecurity and Biopreparedness, peer review initiatives by France, Morocco, Germany, and the Benelux states, the development of Malaysian laboratory biosecurity guidelines, and dual-use education for life scientists in Pakistan. These are a small number of what is a much broader range of examples. Of course, these national voluntary initiatives are not a substitute for verification, but they could nonetheless contribute to institutionally strengthening the BWC. So perhaps it may be useful to actually take stock of what has been done and to build a better understanding of what works and what has been less effective. One practical step in this regard could be the development and perhaps expansion of earlier proposals for a platform for voluntary initiatives, or wider ideas for a library of ideas of past activities. A third area is perhaps to look again at developments in science and technology. Developments in science and technology offer opportunities as well as challenges to this convention. So a third area could perhaps be fresh eyes on some of the opportunities from developments. Some of these opportunities from relevant technologies have advanced considerably since they were last discussed at the BEREX process in 1992 and 1993. To provide one example, there is now a growing number of space-based sensors that could raise confidence in satellite data. Moreover, whereas in VEREX, the ground spatial resolution of commercially available satellite data was estimated at 5 to 10 meters. It is now in the region of 30 centimeters, and there is a possibility to do a great deal more with satellite data. If validated, combinations of these various tools could be applied to generate greater confidence in compliance with the BWC than in the past, and it could be a useful area for substantive technical discussion. A third point is that of cooperation and capacity building. It is clear from past discussions that institutional strengthening will need to be undertaken in a balanced manner. Moreover, events such as COVID clearly highlight the importance of expert networks in responding to crises and exchanging knowledge in relation to the detection and response to outbreaks of disease. It raises the possibility of the BWC mobilizing as a sort of convening capacity to create spaces for scientific and technological discussion amongst technical experts around the world. And this could make a concrete contribution to knowledge exchange, as well as potentially dampening the effects of biological weapons should they ever be used. There are also perhaps some further ideas looking more widely across the work of the OPCW on promoting chemistry for peaceful purposes. If I could have the next slide, please. So just some further points to consider moving forward. Any additional efforts to try and strengthen the convention will have to consider the issue of resources. Given the current and likely future financial challenges facing the convention, this seems important to consider. It will also be important to think about capacity issues. The 3-person ISU is currently strained, and any additional tasks will need additional institutional support. It may also entail greater diversity in terms of expertise, as well as issues related to gender, which I think Mr. Lane will discuss subsequently. I would also add that for technology-focused initiatives, it might also be helpful to build up geographical diversity of expertise as well. I'm closely linked with this. I think it would be useful if any efforts to look at new or old tools and technologies need to make sure that these tools and technologies are validated and fit for purpose and able to generate a degree of collective buy-in from states. Otherwise, good ideas are not going to get very far. This also requires acknowledging the limits of technological solutions. Satellite surveillance is not a silver bullet and would come with its own set of challenges, for example. But perhaps the most significant point is that it will require building political support across regional groups, taking into consideration the range of different interests of different states parties. As noted before, the review conference provides a unique opportunity to move this discussion forward. And I wish you every success in doing that. Donald, if I could have the final slide, and I'll leave it there. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions and discuss further.
Thank you, Dr. Reville, for your very insightful presentation, which illustrates the changing landscape, its impact for the BWC, as well as opportunities and ideas for our upcoming meetings. Our next speaker on the agenda is Ms. Xiaodong Liu, the Deputy Director at the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She will share with us China's perspective on institutional strengthening of the BWC. Ms. Liu, we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, for giving me the floor to speak on behalf of China on the perspective of institutional strengthening of the Convention. Next slide. At the 2017 meeting of state parties, the mandate for the intersessional program 2018 and 2020 was adopted, and institutional strengthening of the Convention was included among the issues to be discussed as a separate topic for discussion. Next slide. Biosecurity is a global issue. With the rapid development of biotechnology, biosecurity challenges have expanded beyond national borders. The rise of non-traditional security factors, such as large-scale epidemics of infectious disease, biosafety laboratory managerial accidents, and bioterrorism, have made the importance of the Convention become more prominent. Against the backdrop of the spread of COVID-19, the international community should pay more attention to biosecurity issues and push forward global biosecurity governance. At this point, we need a strong biological security architecture to address the above-mentioned risks, while the text of the BWC itself, if we compare it with other treaties and conventions, is relatively short and the wording is very general. And also, the BWC does not include any institutional structures, nor does it include measures to ensure compliance by these parties. And so, from the very beginning of the convention, we witnessed various efforts to strengthen it, to create institutions and structures, and to establish confidence-building measures, consultative and verification mechanisms. But till now, the three parties implemented the convention by its own political commitment and got instructions and guidelines on how the provisions should be implemented through ISU's compilings. And here I must admit and appreciate the outstanding work that ISU did in the past and the three parties' endeavor to implement and strengthen the convention to achieve for the object and primary purpose of the convention, that is the complete prohibition of biological weapons. Next slide. This year marks the 45th anniversary of BWC's entry into force. As an important part of the international arms control system and a collective security framework with the United Nations as its core, the Convention has always played an important role in the complete prohibition and thorough destruction of biological weapons and the prevention of the proliferation of biological weapons. We all witnessed that during the years, the three parties made every effort to strengthen the Convention in all the Convention-related areas. It is an international consensus to enhance the universality, authority, and effectiveness of the Convention. Next slide. Though the strengthening of the Convention means different things to different parties, there is a general demand from all parties to strengthen the multilateral biological arms control architecture and effectiveness of the Convention. To this end, efforts have been put forward. One such effort was launched in 1992 with the intention to develop verification and other measures in a draft protocol to the Convention. The attempt to finalize a legally binding instrument failed in year 2001. Nevertheless, in the course of time, there were many other proposals for strengthening the Convention that were not of a legally binding nature, such as confidence-building measures, peer review exercise, transparency initiatives, establish collective preparedness assistance response mechanisms, the review of scientific and technological developments, and how to get the biotech and the life science industry much more engaged with the Convention, to enhance the ISU, as well as to facilitate assistance under Article 7 of the Convention, just to mention some of them. China also has our own initiatives to promote the effectiveness of Convention. Since 1988, China has submitted annually confidence-building measures and information to the Convention. China also actively advocates the development of a voluntary code for biological scientists under the framework of the Convention to let the Convention play a bigger role in guiding biotechnology research to prevent the misuse of biotechnology and to respond to new challenge brought about by the development of biotechnology. China also advocates the establishment of a biological non-proliferation export control and international cooperation regime to balance the non-proliferation and international cooperation. All these initiatives are important for the strengthening of the Convention. However, even if these piecemeal recommendations are all implemented, it will be far from fully enhancing the purpose of the Convention. Here you see the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540 OP2 implementation chart. It is a comparison of the number of states with measures in place in year 2016 for obligations under paragraph 2 of the Resolution 1540. Compared to legal and enforcement measures taken place in nuclear and chemical fields, measures in biological field is the lowest. This result could not be singled as due to the function and work of IAEA and OPCW, but I believe a weak BWC might be one of the reasons. In general, these piecemeal solutions won't work from the point of view of comprehensive implementation. Next slide. The negotiation and the formulation of a protocol to enhance the effectiveness of the convention is the consensus of the international community and a wish for many years. The lack of such verification regime poses a challenge to the effectiveness of the convention. Looking back upon the past in the light of the present, China has always believed that negotiating a legally binding protocol that includes a verification mechanism will help ensure that the convention is fully and effectively implemented, and that biotechnology is not used for purposes against the convention. Next slide. The international community has gone through a long and winding road. Huge efforts have been made, which fully demonstrates the determination of the parties to strengthen the effectiveness of the convention. Next slide. COVID-19 pandemic has gnawed alarm bell in biosecurity. All parties need to jointly work together to break the current deadlock and support negotiations within a multilateral framework on the measures to enhance the effectiveness of the convention. We all know the protocol negotiations were highly contentious and divisive throughout their existence, even created great confrontation which undermines the effectiveness of the convention. For the reality, I recall the chair of the 2019 meeting of experts on institutional strengthening of the convention submitted. It is obvious that there is no prospect of consensus on this matter, or in the near future. Even if consensus did exist, negotiation of the protocol would last 4 years, and with the current financial uncertainties for the BWC, it is unclear how financial support for future negotiations could be sustainable. And some state parties express that due to current rapid advances in science and technology, a permanent verification mechanism to prevent potential breaches of the convention is not achievable. Among these main difficulties that we are facing, verification techniques might be the most crucial and standing one. China's solution will be a step-by-step approach. The state parties should agree to resume the discussion of a legally binding instrument, including the technical possibilities to verify in the forthcoming ninth review conference. For that purpose, we might think to restart the work of the technical experts working group as the basis. At the same time, utilizing the academic and research resources to complement this complex work. All this will depend on the political will of these parties on strengthening the convention in a comprehensive and balanced manner. Next slide. This round of the review process has already started. China suggests that this intersessional program submit recommendations to the next review conference to restart negotiation of a BWC protocol. As Rome was not built in a day, progress could only be made by building upon past achievement. China is willing to work with all parties to take substantive measures to enhance the convention and jointly promote the review process to achieve concrete outcomes. Trust but verify. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liu, for sharing with us China's perspective on institutional strengthening of the convention and for highlighting important questions related to CBM's enhancement of the ISU verification, among others. Our fifth panelist today is Mr. Aaron Lainé, who works as a disarmament advisor at the Irish Permanent Mission here in Geneva. Mr. Lainé will address a very topical matter, namely gender perspective towards strengthening the BWC and other disarmament fora. Let me now pass the floor to Mr. Lainé.
And thank you, UNODA, and to the ISU for organizing and inviting me to speak on this timely issue, as the chair mentioned. And thank you for organizing this valuable series of webinars. To date, the BWC can largely be considered a success. Biological weapons are seemingly excluded from the arsenals of state and non-state actors alike. Nevertheless, we should always be looking to examine ways to strengthen the convention and our working methods. So in my remarks, I'll begin by outlining the value and importance of considering gender perspectives throughout arms control and disarmament in general, and then I'll elaborate on how such considerations can and should strengthen the work of the BWC in particular. Of gender perspectives, international peace and security conversations over the last couple of decades is still met with varying degrees of skepticism, with the BWC being no exception. There are plenty of misconceptions and lack of awareness surrounding the issue, misconceptions that can be cast away through engaging in good faith conversations with an open mind. In this control, there are two main avenues through which gender perspectives can be addressed. The first is by a gender lens to examining security challenges and weapons-related issues. Gendered impacts must be assessed. The evidence is clear that women, men, girls, and boys experience different threats during and after conflict, as well as being differentially impacted by weapons and their flows in non-conflict environments. The second avenue is gender equality and improving women's meaningful participation and agency in arms control and disarmament, with a real on the word meaningful to avoid box checking exercises and to ensure that women are involved in decision making at all levels. One of the pioneer initiatives in this area is UN Security 25, which underpins the women, which this year celebrates 20 years of recognizing the gendered impact of conflict, as well as the vital role that women play in resolving conflict. And it happened 20 years ago. The Security Council has 9 subsequent women, peace, and security resolutions and reinforced work and strengthening sin. And made are 1325 linkages between the women, peace, and security agenda and disarmament and arms control. 1325 conflict is used to wage those conflicts. In Geneva, for example, under Champions Disarmament Impact Group, of which I is a co-chair of, and the group has four overall main objectives. It aims to expand the disarmament community's knowledge of gender issues and practical action in specific arms control processes. It identifies opportunities to bring gender perspectives to disarmament discussions. It facilitates information and supports practical engagement and action in disarmament forum. We've seen some advancements in gender perspectives already in several different multilateral arms control frameworks. This includes the Convention on Cluster Munitions, the Arms Trade Treaty, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the Anti-Personal Landmine Convention, and different UN General Assembly resolutions. The Arms Trade Treaty in particular is groundbreaking, that it's the first international treaty which formally recognizes violence. Research on well-known examples of gendered impacts, informing deliberations within both the NPT review process and the recently entered into force treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So there's clear evidence that applying a gender perspective to certain disarmament and arms control conventions has brought improvements to their effectiveness and their implementation, both at the multilateral level as well as down to the practical implementation on the ground. WD process in particular have been slow to incorporate, and not least the bylaw to bring perspectives and broaden our discussions beyond traditional security. Considering gender perspectives allows for a deeper underlying assumptions about how gender work, dynamics of disarmament. One of the included in deliberate considerations is the relative limit of data available on the difficulties in establishing to a biological agent and its observed effects. Previous biological weapons used have not been followed by comprehensive epidemiological studies, and previous fighting men. So there's a very much a need for more aggregated research and data on the effects of biological weapons to further inform our understanding and decision making. Sex and gender disaggregated data, as well as knowledge of gender perspectives, can contribute to states' preparedness and enhance under the BWC. In recent years, the international has begun to address this lack of research. Last year, UNIDIR released a missing links report, of which co-panelist Jamie Revel is a co-author of, and I would invite to correct me if I misquote it. And it focuses on understanding sex and gender related impacts of chemical and biological weapons. With regards to the biological available data, the report used natural disease outbreaks such as Ebola to describe gender and sex specific effects, as they would very much mirror the effects of a fabricated or weaponized pathogen. So I'm going to go over a few of the findings in the report. With specific exposure to biological weapons has been associated with harm to the as well as birth defects and long-term health consequences for children born to exposed parents. Anthrax, which has been prominent in past biological weapons programs, is associated with maternal and fetal health. The WHO has reported that Ebola in pregnancy is associated with high rate of obstetric complications and poor maternal and does not women, but it allows for a more comprehensive analysis across all intersections of society. An example of this is that weapons can disproportionately, particularly if the agents are aerosolized or dispersed through the air. As children have a higher number of respirations per minute, they're at higher risk of being exposed to relatively greater dose. And finally, gender-specific effects. Understanding how gender norms structure societies helps uncover different patterns of exposure to biological agents. For example, in most societies, women are typically the caregivers, and in the event of a biological attack or a disaster, they tend to have both a frontline and a long-term caregiving role, increasing exposure and risk. This was very much the case in the Ebola outbreak, and is reflected statistically in Guinea, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia. And in Liberia, it was found that 75% of those who had been infected or killed by Ebola were women. And now, as we the same dynamic unravel during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is supporting many of the findings of UNIDIR's report last year. And so these examples really only expose the tip of the iceberg. The rest can be discovered through the provision of gender disaggregated research and data. And that information and perspective can contribute to states' preparedness and enhance effectiveness of assistance under Article 7 of the BWC. Last one I'll touch upon is the second avenue that I mentioned, which is the promotion of equal and meaningful participation at all levels of decision-making process. In 2018, 33% of the delegates at the 2018 meeting of states parties to the BWC were women, and women in arms control and disarmament are even more underrepresented at the leadership levels and heads of delegations. We've seen some positive the last couple of years that if we can continue to build upon, will really in the meeting of experts on gender. The 2019 meeting and did at the 2019 meetings of states parties. Last year's MX5 report, chaired by Switzerland, it noted the importance of considering in the framework of the convention, including implications for the implementation of the BWC. And the references follows a general uptick in impacts of biological weapons in broader disarmament community. Last on gender, where participants discussed possible differences in the effects of biological weapons on women and men and their significance for assistance, response, and preparedness. It's important that we maintain this momentum, embrace the manner in which integrating gender perspectives into our work will lead to supporting the development of effective response and assistance strategies, as well as welcoming new and fresh perspectives across all aspects of BWC implementation, ultimately strengthening its functionment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Laine, for your pertinent remarks and for showing us the value of mainstreaming a gender perspective in BWC. Last but not least, we will hear from Dr. Una Jacob, a research fellow at the Peace Research Institute Frankfurt, about her reflections on the upcoming 9th Review Conference. Dr. Jacob has also been following closely the BWC for several years. Dr. Jacob, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you also to you and to the ISU for inviting me to speak here today. Yeah, this presentation will be all about the review conferences, and for those of you out there who are new to the BWC world and maybe even to the whole world of disarmament, I will briefly describe the whole process, well, not the process, but the institution. And I will then take you back through previous review conferences, and finally will present some thoughts on how we might approach the upcoming 9th Review Conference next year. First slide, please. Thank you. So under the BWC, review conferences have been held roughly every 5 years, and all but one of them ended with a consensual and a substantive final document. And these final documents have always consisted of a procedural report and have contained final declarations. And in the BWC, this consists of an article by article review that records shared interpretations and common understandings for each article. Since 2006, the final documents have also contained a part on decisions and recommendations. And these are the forward-looking part of the final declarations. And I've listed some examples here for decisions and common understandings very selectively. Next slide, please. For the following few minutes, I will talk very briefly about examples of what has and has not been agreed by previous review conferences. And again, these are just examples very selectively, and they're roughly in a chronological order. So there have been efforts to add verification measures, and that actually goes back to the first review conference, but that hasn't materialized yet, as we all know. There have also been quite concrete proposals for action plans, for example, on the implementation of Article 10 and for national implementation, but that didn't work out either. And as far as I personally see it, the outcomes of the past intercessional processes haven't quite been translated into effective action yet. And then there were topics that weren't quite agreed by the review conferences, but or not finalized at review conferences, but they were deferred to other forums. And that, for example, is true for the CBMs that were finalized by an experts meeting, or for the mandate for the protocol negotiations, which was agreed by a special conference. And also, as most of you will recall, the decision on the current intercessional process wasn't made at the last review conference, but at the meeting of states parties. And I've listed these examples just to show that there has been some flexibility in the past and some, yeah. Okay, next slide. So, of course, much more has been agreed by review conferences than what's on this slide. And again, this is just an example, or 3 examples. But what I would like to highlight and point out is that it's not just concrete decisions that review conferences are important for, but there have been other achievements, and I think they're really worth keeping in mind. First of all, after the severe crisis the BWC found itself in after the protocol negotiation ended in 2001, it was the sixth review conference that actually helped consolidate the regime and really put the BWC back on track and give it new impetus and a new work program. And also, quite in general, I think it's important to note that and to keep in mind that review conferences have played a big part in maintaining the strong norm against biological weapons that we have today, and they've done so over decades. And this is just to underline the relevance and the importance of review conferences very generally. So having said that, I would like to turn to the upcoming review conference with the next slide, please. So when we look ahead, when I prepared the presentation, I thought about how to structure that, and I've decided to divide it into three aspects. So two deal with the substantive parts, with issues, and the third will be about practical aspects that I think might be useful to consider. So first, let's say the easiest, well, easy in quotation marks, of course, but I think would be the preparations for the article-by-article review. And I'm not saying that this will be easy, that the review will be easy, but I think we've seen in the past that preparing and circulating language proposals for final declarations has helped greatly, and I think that could be manageable even in the current difficult settings that we find ourselves in. So just to see where common ground lies and to save time at the actual conference, because time will be short. No matter how long the review conference will be, time will be short. So that's the first step, I think, or the first part that could be considered to prepare the article-by-article review. The second part, and that's a little more voluminous, is the preparations for the forward-looking elements. And I think it might be useful to focus first on those issues where there might be a convergence of views and where it might even be possible to prepare decisions. From my perspective, and again, this is not exhaustive, but I think the discussions under Article 7 have shown that there's quite large common ground for a database and other issues to consider that. Same might be true for the proposal to have a voluntary global code of conduct for biosciences. And I think everybody is aware, and most would agree, that we definitely need something to review scientific and technological developments. And we've heard a little bit about that in the presentation by Dr. Rebel earlier. So I think these are elements where the next review conference really could make progress. And the next slide, please. And then there's a whole set of topics that will come up in the discussions and that will need consideration, but that might not be quite as close to consensus. And I think if we were all in a room now, people would smile at that phrasing, but yeah, but still these topics will have to be considered in one way or the other. And since we're at the MX4, and they don't all concern institutional strengthening, but I decided to list just whatever came to my mind. But I think most pertinent to this MX is the whole complex of transparency, confidence building, and compliance. And that ranges from discussing additional transparency measures to thinking about how the CBMs could be reviewed and maybe even reformed. I personally think it might be worthwhile to give a thought or two to the function of compliance reports. Compliance reports have always been requested from state parties, but I think the whole concept might be underutilized. So there might be merit in thinking about that. And I think it will be important to continue to have some dedicated discussion forum for compliance-related issues and for the whole complex of institutional strengthening that we're covering with MX5 at the moment. The other topics are really not new. They've been on the agendas for all not all, but the past review conferences, they concern the whole range of issues connected with implementation of various BWC obligations. Some thought will have to be given to a new intersessional process, whether there should be one, what it should look like, what it should cover, what it should be allowed to do. Finances, I think, will be an issue again. And also the question whether the ISU could be strengthened with additional resources, additional staff, could be given new tasks, a different mandate, and all these questions. So I think these are things that, and then that's not, I mean, that's not new. Most of you will be aware of that anyway, but I think it will be important to prepare for discussions on these issues. Next slide, please, and that's my last. As for practical aspects, I mean, we all know just the fact that we're gathered here virtually illustrates that we're working under very, very different conditions than we'd normally do. But still, I think maybe the things we can do to prepare for the review conference aren't all that different anyway. So I would like to first recall that there used to be background papers prepared by, well, the Secretariat back when we didn't have an ISU, and the ISU at the 7th review conference. We didn't really have them last time, but I think they would be very important as a resource of knowledge and to put everybody on the same ground in terms of what happened at previous review conference, because not all of us have been around for a while. So, and it might be helpful to explore electronic formats to make them even more accessible and searchable, and make it easier to skim through and find maybe specific proposals or specific additional understandings or whatever we have the background papers for. Then, of course, and I think Jamie has mentioned that as well, interactions with all stakeholders will be important and helpful. And I think we definitely need some form of exchange of views. And of course, this is in some parts different and difficult in virtual format, but still working papers, research papers, other informations could be shared online. There could be a hub for information stored somewhere. There could be online discussion forums on specific topics. I mean, we're all in virtual mode anyway, so why not have discussions online? I think the most difficult part would be the informal consultations, informal exchanges of views, but maybe it's possible to find a way there. But I also think that there is an opportunity with all these virtual meetings, because they might be even more inclusive, and they might enable participation by people who otherwise wouldn't or couldn't travel. And yeah, so I think that opportunity should definitely be seized and exploited. So in closing, it hardly needs emphasizing that, of course, intense preparation will be needed, and that, of course, the review conference will be a very important one, as Ambassador Rodriguez pointed out in her opening remarks. But I would also like to underline that I think it is still possible, even if it's more difficult this time, to have these preparations and then to have a productive 9th review conference. And I wish us all every success and good luck for that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob, for highlighting lessons from past review conferences and also sharing your views on the upcoming 9th review conference. Let me now proceed to our Q&A session. We have received many questions and comments from our participants. Given the limited remaining time available, let me focus on a few ones. However, rest assured that we will share all your valuable remarks with the panelists. And before I continue, I just wanted to inform that Ambassador Mailu, the MSP chairperson, is not available to take questions. He has another pressing commitment. However, any question or comments will be shared with Ambassador Mailu. So now I will proceed with the first question. This one is addressed to Ambassador Ayjanova from Kazakhstan. Could you please highlight some of the next steps from Kazakhstan to further engaging with BWC state parties on its proposal? Ambassador, please. I'm not sure if there's any technical problem with Ambassador Aijanova. And in any case, I'm going to encourage other participants to pose questions. If everything is okay, Ambassador? Yeah.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. There is a connection problem. And I don't think that you see me, but at least you hear me. Yes? Is that correct?
Yes, we can hear you, Ambassador.
Okay. So regarding the further steps, we plan to further develop the position of Kazakhstan on implementation of President Tokayev's initiative in the form of a working document. Then we envisage discussing this working document in a meeting with BWC experts on institutional strengthening of the convention, which we understand is planned for April 2021, subject to the epidemiological situation, of course. Further, the updated document, which will take into account constructive discussions and contributions made by experts, will be discussed at the meeting of states parties in the course of the next year, with the objective to present it to the 9th Review Conference of BWCU in November 2021. And this conference is mandated to take decisions of strategic nature for the convention, and we look forward to constructive discussions at the 9th Review Conference. So these are the tentative plans, which we do have in mind now at this stage. But of course, as I have mentioned, we are ready for any kind of inputs and proposals from other member states parties. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And mindful of the time that we have available, I will proceed reading all the questions that we have so far, and in the order that we have received it. So they will help also panelists to prepare for those answers. The first question that I have is for Dr. Revil of UNIDIR. Could you suggest some concrete steps towards building political support for institutional strengthening of the BWC? Then the next question is for Ms. Liu from China. Could you please further elaborate on China's proposal of a step-by-step approach, especially restarting the group of experts? Then the next one is addressed to Mr. Laine from the Permanent Mission of Ireland. What practical steps can states take in order to improve gender balance in their delegations and promote gender perspective throughout our work? And last but not least, for Dr. Jacob, biotech industry and academia represent two important BWC stakeholders. What would be your suggestions for strengthening the dialogue with them and encouraging their active participation in the 9th Review Conference? I would like to proceed now and give the floor to Dr. Revil to answer the first question. Dr. Revil, please, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Madam Chair. I believe Dr. Jacob has raised several of those points, and I would certainly agree with her on the issue of intensive preparation and building convergence. Two things I think are worth emphasising. The first is through working papers, not just sharing, but perhaps taking that a little bit further, and where possible, having cross-regional development of working papers that are submitted early. That could be useful. And there are examples of that in 2006, particularly. And then the other point on sort of meetings and informal workshops as a sort of tool for sharing ideas and better understanding the interests of other states and other experts. So I think that's something important. This is a challenge under the current circumstances, but it's not insurmountable, and the online format may provide opportunities as well as challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Revil. Now, please, Ms. Liu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For that question, my answer will be the meeting of experts could start a discussion and could agree on the idea to resume the discussion of a legally binding instrument. As a first step, the meeting of experts could agree on the technical discussions. So the technical discussions could go as a first step to go. And with that consensus and the meeting of state parties could agree on the idea to establish the meeting of state parties could decide to make proposals to the next review conference that to establish a kind of GGE, the governmental experts group, like we did in 1991, and to discuss to make analysis on the possible verification measures from a scientific and technical point of view. And so the GGE could, so I'm probably that goes too far, because that our first step will be the meeting of experts discuss the possibility to agree on the technical discussions, and the meeting of state parties could make suggestions to the next review conference to establish a GGE to discuss the possible verification measures from technical and science point of view. And and later, as the following up steps, the GGE could, of course, making proposals on that measures and to provide technical references to the negotiation. Thank you. And also, my last point that China will listen to all the ideas and will work with all the parties to take this idea further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Lainé for his question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the in terms of encouraging gender balance and promoting gender perspectives, I would encourage interested participants to refer to the Gender Disarmament Resource Pack for multilateral practitioners that was put together by the Disarmament Impact Group, which Ireland helped put together. I'll put a link in the chat, but it was last revised in January 2020, and it presents key concepts and approaches for integrating gender and arms control. It outlines what's made to date. It offers practical guidance on how to make multilateral meetings more gender responsive, and provides a list of further resources as well. And some of those examples of practical guidance are adopting agenda items that examine gender perspectives, approving mandates for integrating gender perspectives into the substance of delegates' work, participating in the activities, the Champions Disarmament Impact Group, engaging with focal points of the network of women, peace, and security, and there's really a lot more in there in terms of practical steps. So I'll put this link in the chat, and at the end of the day, it's important that we continue to expand this conversation in the context of the BWC, because in addition to informing our work at the multilateral level, in the event that a biological weapon attack or disaster does take place, it's really important that we have the systems in place that are capable of acknowledging the gendered effects of the weapons, and in order to respond to an efficient and appropriate manner. So yeah, the link's in the chat. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. Now I turn to Dr. Jacob for the question that was raised to her. Dr. Jacob, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be to really involve representatives from industry and academia, and I think that's really important. It would be helpful to start involving them already with in the preparations, in the preparatory process, because that would give them a chance to sort of familiarize themselves with the BWC and the BW world and the security perspective to their work, which might be quite alien for some of them still. And that could be done, of course. I mean, the easiest way is to invite such representatives to workshops and virtual events. It might also be an idea to prepare working papers, if delegations prepare working papers, and if the topics are suitable for that, it might be an option to write joint working papers, to invite or to include industry and academia representatives in the writing process. As for the review conference itself, I think it would be important, like assuming that we'll have one in the usual mode, like with everybody can be present and everything. It would be important to have the chance for many informal meetings and talks in the margins of meetings, at side events and all that. There is a possibility, and I think Jamie Revel mentioned that already, for having panel discussions, and there are precedents for that. We had that at previous conferences, so to invite representatives to panels and then have an interactive discussion. And in general, I think it would be worth considering opening as many sessions as possible of the review conference to the public, so that people can follow discussions and that would help representatives from different communities to better understand what's going on in the BWC and raise awareness and create interest and mutual contacts and everything. So I think that that would be helpful too. So that's, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much. At this stage, we have one more question, and this one is to any of the speakers. And it starts with a comment and then the question. The participant says that I think all of these topics that were discussed during the past webinars on MX can be covered in a verification protocol. What are the prospects for resuming the negotiations on verification protocol? Don't you think it is worth pushing for it? And since this question was addressed to any of the panelists, I would like to ask if there's any of the speakers that would like to break the ice and make a comment on these questions. Perhaps I can encourage Ms. Liu. Ms. Liu, you have the floor.
Yeah. It's a very good question, actually. And like I said during my presentation, that the protocol negotiations is really the biggest challenging task ahead of us. During the negotiating period for that 7 years, we could see that the negotiation itself was highly contentious and divisive even, and the rolling text and the composition text at the final stage could not even narrow the gaps of the states parties. But and also I stress that during the years we did see many proposals from different areas to strengthen the convention, especially in the area of promoting the transparency and confidence building measures, and among others. We see that, of course, I agree the idea that all these elements could be put into the protocol. So that's why I think that is value to push the idea to negotiate the legally binding protocol. We say that Rome was not built in a day, so I think that we all expressed that the states parties have the determination and the resolution to push forward and to increase the effectiveness of the convention. So I think it's time to show that political will and to start from the beginning and to see what we can do to achieve that final goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would also like to hear from Dr. Jacob, her comments on this question.
Thank you. It's a tough question. I don't even know if I have the answer to the question whether it would be possible to put it all in one protocol. I think there would be a lot to put in one mechanism, one protocol, one whatever. But I think whether or not it's possible, it definitely would take a long time to get there. And with everything that's going on out there, I'm not sure we have that time, even if we wanted to. So I think leaving politics aside and just looking at the challenges we face, it's just more practical and necessary to focus on the things we can achieve as soon as possible. And I think going through a holistic protocol is not the fastest way to move the BWC forward and to prepare the BWC and everybody for the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob. And just before I close, I would like to give also the opportunity to Dr. Reville to comment on this question. Dr. Reville, please.
Thanks. The protocol, no protocol is a political discussion for BWC states parties, but a couple of practical points. I mean, there's a question of sort of where and how do you start doing this? The composite text, which was the Tibor Toth's best guess document, what was a compromise, and many states disliked it. If you want to go back slightly further to the rolling text, you'd have to sort of address and unpick about 1,000 square brackets in there. So there would be practical challenges to doing this, and it would also require some considerable updating to take into account sort of changing context. Yeah, so just a comment on that.
Okay, thank you. As our webinar comes to an end, I would like to thank all of you for your active participation. Events like today, even if of an informal nature, provide a valuable opportunity to share information and advance our discussions. It is my sincere hope that what the world is currently experiencing will give us renewed strength and motivation to take up the discussion on institutional strengthening of the Convention and to accelerate progress on key areas for the consideration of the 9th Review Conference. I look forward to our discussions and to working with all of you on this important issue. I thank you.